The leader of the largest religion in the world has come to America for the first time, but the Prince of Peace is being assailed by members of his own flock who are not happy one bit about his taking this religion into the 21st century. There are perhaps no greater vermin on the planet than those who make billions of dollars in profit from pills and medications meant to save lives. And as we discover, their excuses for raising the prices are mostly lies. Scott Walker could no longer lie to himself about becoming president. The field thins, and candidates such as Mike Huckabee have to decide if everyone must team up to defeat Donald Trump. The Arkansas governor will join us. And in telling it like it is, are we past time to close America's doors on accepting even one more refugee before we care for our own people? Hard questions. They deserve simple answers. I'm Ed Berliner. This is The Hard Line for Tuesday, September 22nd, 2015.
The problem is that neither side can use this pope for political advantage. I think the Democrats are going to find themselves in a box every time that they try to do so because, in fact, yes, the Pope talks about climate change and immigration and caring for the poor in language that often sounds like it would fit with the Democratic Party. But at the same time, this is a very strongly pro-life Pope as well.
The Holy Father comes to America, and unlike past times when a pope has come to this country, not everyone is so thrilled at the idea. As a matter of fact, there is a groundswell of discontent in the Catholic ranks when it comes to His Holiness. A pope who has already turned the tide on controversial issues such as gay marriage and abortion, and seems willing to create as much of a furor as he can in the belief change is good. Well, not everyone agrees, and that indeed says something about the people and the flock and those who are following this pope and Catholicism indeed. Maybe it hopes to be relevant deep into the century and maintain its hold as the biggest religion in the world. They've got to make some changes. Always a pleasure to welcome back pastor at Our Lady of Lourdes Church in Massapequa Park, New York, multiple author, commentator, and columnist, Msgr. Jim Lisante, joined by the former president of Catholic Charities USA and vice president for mission at the University of St. Thomas in Minnesota, Reverend Larry Snyder. Gentlemen, I want to thank you both for being here. I feel so safe right now, and believe me, we are not going to get into confession because we simply don't have enough time. Msgr. Lisante, let me go ahead and start with you. Let me start right out with this issue, and it comes out in the Washington Post. The headline says, some American Catholics really don't like Pope Francis. Matter of fact, 45% of conservative Catholics have a favorable opinion, but that's down 72% from a year ago. Why?
Well, you know, first of all, let's make a distinction, Ed, between liking the man. I think everybody loves the man, thinks he's sincere and authentic, but we disagree sometimes with some of his ideas. Nothing wrong with that. The Pope isn't speaking, you know, from the chair of St. Peter saying you either believe this or you're not Catholic. He's giving points of view on the poor and our need to serve the poor, on the ecology of the world and how to save the planet and not hurt the poor when we exploit the planet. And, of course, his comments on immigration make perfect sense for a man whose family immigrated from Italy to South America, who sees new opportunities that come through when people are given a spirit of welcome. So these are things that he believes in strongly. He's sharing his reasons why he believes them. Again, I think even very conservative Catholics may say they don't like some of what he says. I don't think many people I know don't like him because he's a hard man not to love. He's living the message, and I think that's what gives him great authenticity and power in terms of what he's teaching.
Reverend Snyder, are these conservative Catholics scared of the message?
Well, I think, you know, none of us like to be challenged. We all tend to want to live in a comfort zone, and I think, yeah, I think the opening message of the show today was good in that the Pope's going to push all of us and probably into places that we don't want to go. So in that sense, are we afraid of his message? Yeah, I mean, we'd rather not be pushed. But I think at the same time, if you really read the gospel, sometimes the gospel is very hard to take too. So it's one of those things that we try not to pick and choose, but rather really look at the whole picture and say, you know, if I'm going to embrace this, I need to embrace the whole picture of what Christianity's about.
So, Reverend Snyder, when you say places we don't want to go, what are we so afraid of?
Well, I think it's when we start applying what the Pope is saying to economic systems, social systems, that quite frankly, we're probably pretty comfortable with. I'm not so sure we really want to start looking at, you know, how we need to maybe put those things together again. And I think sometimes people misinterpret what the Pope is saying too. Is you've heard, at least I've heard, people say, well, the Pope is very much against capitalism, but the Pope is against any economic system where the poor are left out. And so, just an example, in his kind of major teaching, Evangelii Gaudium, or the Joy of the Gospel, people were very upset at that. He never says capitalism once in there. So I think people need to take it with a more open mind, that he's talking about all global systems and maybe not just our own world.
Monsignor Lisante, isn't it fair to say, though, if Jesus were here today, maybe even Jesus himself would say, things have to change. We need to push ourselves forward. We don't want to put words in his mouth or anybody else. We don't want to change the Bible. But you've got to change with the times. And is it not fair to say that the Catholic Church, while still the biggest church in the world, you need to change for the age, the people, the way people live? You've got to change or you fade away.
Well, Ed, again, to make a distinction, I was on a program at PBS recently, and he said, is the Pope going to throw out dogma? And the truth is, he hasn't thrown out any dogma. He hasn't changed any dogma. But he has changed, importantly, the tone of what we teach. It's very nice to say we've got eternal truth on our side, but if you're not explaining that well, in a human way, in a compassionate way, if you're not explaining with great sensitivity and showing that you feel people's pain, then your teaching is nothing more than highfalutin nonsense. I think this Holy Father is saying we have our truth, but our truth needs to be demonstrated through a human, caring prism, and I think he does that very well. He really genuinely loves people, and he hasn't changed any teaching. But boy, for instance, if you're a homosexual Catholic and you felt estranged from the church for a long time, the door is now open to say, come on home, this is still your spiritual home. If you're a divorced and remarried person and you're wondering, God, I can't go to communion, I haven't gone in years and years because I'm not allowed, this Pope seems to be saying, but the Mass and communion is really for everybody. Come to church and know that you are welcome. You call it changing with the times. I call it just being aware of what Christ would do. And you don't find him anywhere, sitting with sinners and saying, get out of my sight, I don't want to be near you. He is a man, Jesus, who welcomed everyone. And I think this Pope is very much a reflection of Jesus.
I'm going to hit right on that, Reverend Snyder. This is a Jesus, this is a God whom we are told loves everyone, wanted to include everyone. So in many ways, the conservative Christians that are right now very upset that this is a Pope looking at their political platform, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, I'll say it out loud, don't they need to lighten up a little bit and realize what the main message is, not just from the Pope, but from the faith itself?
I think you make an excellent point there. And the other criticism that you sometimes hear about Pope Francis is that he is changing things. And as Monsignor Lisante says, he certainly hasn't changed any dogma at all. But he hasn't even really changed any of the social teaching that might be a little hard for people to hear, because if you go back to Pope Benedict XVI, he certainly had some very hard-hitting social documents like his encyclical Caritas in Veritate. And St. Pope John Paul II also had some very, very tough things to say about the economy in his encyclical Solicitudo Rei Socialis. So why people were not as upset with those two popes, my guess is they just tended to ignore what they said in those points. And with Pope Francis, his rhetoric is so passionate, I guess.
It's so honest. Let's be honest. It's honest. It's real. It doesn't seem like it comes from any script whatsoever. It comes from the man's heart.
Right, and he speaks very powerfully, I think, to people's souls about that. So I think, the substance has not changed at all. It's his style that I think is really much different than we've seen from popes in the recent past.
All right, I got about a minute left here, so I'm going to ask you both. I'll start with you then, Reverend Snyder, 30 seconds. What is the one thing that you hope the Pope gets across in this visit to the United States, most important to you?
Well, I think, aside from his concern for the poor, the Pope really, like you mentioned, talks about inclusion. So I hope he can bring us together. We're a country that has a lot of divisions, and yet the Pope's message is simply, we always have to keep everybody in the tent together, if you will. And I hope that's an accepted message by people here, and we can maybe come together a little closer than we have been.
Boy, in light of what's going on in the country right now, that's a tall order indeed. Monsignor Lisante, I'll give you the last word then, here 30 seconds. What is it that you hope the Pope brings and says?
I think what he will say to Congress is what he's saying to every American. You are so richly blessed, America, the richest, most powerful, in many ways most wonderful country in the world. But to whom much has been given, much is expected. And he's going to challenge us to take the many blessings we have and share them more broadly. And it's a wonderful and necessary message, Ed.
Can I get an agreement from both of you that we hope that everybody puts politics aside for a couple of days?
Amen.
Not going to happen, but yeah, sure.
I'll hear the amen from Reverend Snyder on that. I know the Monsignor Lisante's right there. That's a perfect word to end it right there. Gentlemen, Monsignor Jim Lisante, Reverend Larry Snyder, I want to thank you both for being here. Please enjoy the next couple of days. Hopefully it will wake some people up here in America. Thank you so much for your time. On deck, must Republicans, POTUS candidates, the presidential candidates, now team up and defeat Donald Trump or lose any chance of the White House? Former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee is here with his response. It's next, only on The Hard Line.